Hey everybody, it's Dohrok here, and I wanted to make a video as we start to go into Wrath of the Lich King Classic, just kind of going over some basic raiding principles and fundamentals, and some basic etiquette that you might have while raiding, just to kind of make things a little bit more pleasant, a little bit more efficient for yourself and for your raid. Now, I know that most people in Classic are probably just going to be running gbids, so your etiquette doesn't really matter, it just matters how big your wallet is. But let's say you're one of the last few remaining people that might want to get away from gbids and join a guild, or you might be in a guild and you just kind of need a refresher on some basics, and you want to learn a little bit about how to be prepared while raiding in Wrath of the Lich King. So let's go a little bit into how to actually be prepared for one of your raids and what the new consumables are going to be, what kind of new flask you have, and what kind of new elixirs you got, food, stuff like that. So here's our 4 core raiding flask in Wrath of the Lich King. That's going to be Flask of the Frostworm, Endless Rage, Stoneblood, and Pure Mojo. I will say Pure Mojo here is showing as the 45 MP5. It was originally buffed in patch 3.2, I think, from 30 to 45, and I think currently it is the 45 one on the beta, so that does make it a little bit better if that's the case. And let's say you don't want to use one of the flasks, you are someone that wants to use maybe more agi or crit. There are still elixirs. There's going to be different battle elixirs and guardian elixirs, just like there was in TBC. They'll function the same way. They last an hour, they go away on death. So if you happen to be one of those classes, then these are the different options that you have for you. You got different battle elixirs, different guardian elixirs. There's also some new potions. Wrath of the Lich King introduces a new system where you're only able to use one potion in a single boss encounter. So the concept of pre-potting came to exist, and thus you use one of your potions before the fight starts, and then you're able to use one of your potions during the fight itself. And we have a few different potions that are going to be available to you. Pretty much everyone is going to be using Potion of Speed, but here you can see, there's some different utility potions that you can use as well, as on top of, just basic health and mana pods. And then lastly, we'll go into a little bit about foods. There's going to be some new food varieties, as well as the introduction of Feast. There are Great Feast, which are like the smaller feast, and then there's Fish Feast, which are slightly better. The Fish Feast only give spell power, attack power, and stamina. So if you want to use a food that's like, outside of one of those stats, there are different varieties of food that you can choose from, like armor pen, haste rating, hit rating, things like that. And then there's also equivalent foods for the same stats that a Fish Feast would give you, 46 spell power and 80 attack power. And so other than your consumes there, your food, flask, and potions, I can really only suggest making sure that you have enough reagents to buff. If you're a class that's going to be buffing, just make sure you bring them. Buffing is going to be raid-wide in most cases, so there's not really a reason not to just bring a stack so that you can help buff and be a little more efficient with someone else's mana as well. And on the topic of buffs, make sure you buff quickly when you get to your raid and you get an in-group, everyone's in range. Go ahead and throw your buffs out. Wipes are going to happen during progression as well. You're going to have to run back and you're going to have to, reapply buffs. Go ahead and throw your buffs out as soon as possible. Another thing I'll note too is that if you're sitting down to eat, make sure you're eating mage food first, so that you're going in and drinking first, and then eat your food buff. That way you're going to apply the food buff while you're getting your mana back. And then once you have enough mana back, you got your food buff on, go ahead and throw the rest of your buffs out for your group and get everyone rebuffed as soon as possible. Now, let's say you do happen to wipe and you have some sort of wipe protection out, like a, DI out, soul stones out, someone that can Ankh is able to get back up and start rezzing people. It's good practice to res people that are able to res first. You want to res, those are usually healers. In Wrath of the Lich King, it's going to be all healers are going to be able to res. So res any of your healers, and then you're going to want to res mana users after that, so that they can sit and drink, and then res, melee physical DPS in your tanks. The reason why I would prioritize mana users over your physical DPS users is because, healers are able to heal the people that only need health back, assuming that they get rezzed first. They're going to get their mana back. Other people are going to get rezzed. And if you have like a warrior, he's just going to need a heal, whereas mana users are going to need to sit down and drink and actually regen that mana back. And so let's say you're not dead or having to buff and you're actually having to do some actual combat in your raid. There's some things that you can do during that actual combat to kind of make things a little bit easier for everyone else. First, I would say if you're someone that has a dispel, make sure you have something on your UI that shows that you can dispel them or dispel a certain debuff, or you can add some kind of custom debuff to it, or just something that is going to let you know that someone has a debuff and it's been on them for some kind of extended period of time. I understand that might be a certain person's role, but you should be aware that if someone else is not able to do that at that instant moment and you are, then you might as well do it. And I would say probably one of the most important things during raiding is, how do you actually communicate that to someone else? During an encounter, actually during your entire raid, communication is going to make or break, how fast or efficiently you do something. It's going to make or break how much fun you're having. It can be a lot of different things for your raid group. But I would say in general, while you're in a boss fight, it's going to be better to keep your comms clear. Don't talk about a bunch of useless stuff while you're doing a boss fight and someone else is trying to call out mechanics. Try not to talk over each other, and make sure your comms are accurate. And I would say in general, in most of your callouts, you should just leave it to your raid leader. If your raid leader is wrong, just do the wrong decision and then deal with it after you guys wipe, and you can address it at that moment and be like, hey, the reason why we wiped was this. Don't do that like during the fight, otherwise you're gonna really throw off your groove and start to confuse people, that are listening for a specific set of instructions. And then I would say the last thing to really keep in mind during combat is, don't take extra damage. I'm gonna call it stupid damage. I'm gonna generalize all forms of preventable damage into what I'm gonna call stupid damage. So if you take a bunch of fall damage and you end up dying because of it, that's on you. If you die because you're standing in fire because you just weren't paying attention to a mechanic, then that's on you. So just try to avoid taking as much extra damage as possible. And I think one of the biggest reasons why people end up not seeing a mechanic is because they end up putting a bunch of stuff on their screen. Like their UI is really cluttered and it might be showing a bunch of information that they don't necessarily need to have, or it's redundant in several places on their screen. And in a lot of cases, I think a lot of this stuff can just be cleaned up so that you can see more around your character and you can focus more around your character. This is going to be really up to you and what you consider to be like prime real estate on your screen. I have some general rules that I like to follow. I would just kind of have like a general idea of what you want on your screen and try not to, clutter it up too much. And by no means do I think that you need to take my opinion on screen real estate with, any kind of face value or anything like that. Just make sure you have, a nice clean UI so that you can accurately see all the information that you need to see, where you need to see it, and it's not too cluttered around your character. And then last but not least, I would say probably the most important part of this is just make sure you have fun, be nice to each other, have a good time with your friends. I would say majority of the raiding experience is shaped by who you raid with. And if you're having a good time with your friends, then that's great. I would just suggest again that you just put in as much effort as everyone else is, and you're gonna have a good time with them. And that's about all I got for now. I hope you guys have a good time in Wrath of the Lich King. I hope you guys have a good time raiding. Maybe pump your numbers up a little bit more. Hope you learned something. And yeah, have a good one. Later.